Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, highly caffeinated, snow angel-friendly weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and its fans' new obsession with the words wind chill factor. I'm Eric Hansen, still in my TV clothes. He's Tyler James. It is, We're the co-publishers, columnists, beat writers, and custodians at InsideNDSports.com. Ahead on tonight's show, we'll catch you up on the news of the day, including what we saw during a media practice window Monday morning. Incoming transfer portal news, we've got that for you too as ND starts building for 2025. Long-term building, head coach Marcus Freeman signs a contract extension. Oh yeah, and there's a college football playoff game Friday night at Notre Dame Stadium. We'll share our keys to victory for both Notre Dame and Indiana. Coordinator takeaways, more All-America accolades, the latest on the recruiting front, and your questions live, so start filling up the queue. This is Football Never Sleeps.
I really ratcheted up the guitar lick at the end there for you, Eric. I felt like
I appreciate that. We appreciate Steve Lundgren for putting that together for us.
All right. Well, we appreciate everyone who is here with us tonight as well. Before we get rolling, make sure that you're subscribed to us here on YouTube. It's free. It just costs you a click, and it'll allow you to get comments and questions in during the show. Also, I ask that you kindly hit the like button. If you're running out of holiday gift ideas, we would like you to consider giving a Notre Dame fan the gift of an InsideNDSports.com subscription. You can sign up for gift subscriptions from 1 month up to 5 years. You can do so at NotreDame.rivals.com/gifts/purchase. And I've included the link in the video description below so you don't have to type all that out. And you don't have to stand in any lines or sweat out any shipping deadlines. Then, as always, if you're not already a subscriber to InsideNDSports.com, you can sign up for your own 30-day free trial with promo code NDYT. And there's a link in the video description below for that as well. That is all the plugs I have for now. So let's have a good show, Eric.
All right. Well, I'm kind of driving the boat today, and we're going to start with our opening drive, which is news of the day and practice observations. So we had about a 25-minute window this morning, outdoors, temps in the 50s, low 50s, light mist. Not at all what we'll see Friday in Notre Dame Stadium, but Notre Dame's been practicing outside, and they, I think, just wanted to get us wet. So let's start with the special teams play we saw, because I think people are really curious what Mitch Jeter kicking field goals looks like. So what did we see Mitch Jeter do today?
Well, I guess you could say he was better than he has been so far, or he was in November, but he wasn't great. We had him as 4 of 6 on live field goals. He missed twice from 40 yards. And I had him down for makes from 45, 46, 47, and 35. We were watching in the end zone, so it's a little bit hard to distinguish the yard markers. I try to do my best to follow the line to the sideline and figure out what that number is. So those numbers, those yardage markings might be off just slightly, but he definitely made 4 of 6, and 1 hit off the post. And then the other, I think that was
wide left.
Wide left, yeah. So he hit the right post, and then we went wide left. So not,
but the distance was spot on. I mean, he was halfway to 2/3 up the goalpost when he doinked it.
Yeah. So I mean, as it relates to that, like, any concerns about leg strength don't seem to. I mean, those don't make any sense to me at this point. It's more a matter of putting it between the uprights, and that's the problem. He missed even a short one against USC, so we will see what those guys, or what he can do in terms of maybe proving some of us doubters wrong after a bad end to the season for himself.
Yeah, and we had a chance to talk to all the coordinators today, including special teams coordinator Marty Biaggi. You know, Marty mentioned the same thing that Marcus Freeman did, that at least this is the first time Mitch Jeter has had a chance to kind of rest it, and that seemed to help somewhat. That he didn't practice much at all during October and November. They just try to have him ready to go on game days. And so now he's practicing more, and we'll just see how it goes. But he didn't have to kick in the cold today, or a swirling wind or anything, just media people writing down everything that he was doing. So another thing that we observed today that was significant was Jeremiah Love wearing a big knee brace. So what did you think about the way you saw Jeremiah move and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so for context, if we haven't included it already, we saw the first 3 periods of practice today. We were there for about 25 minutes, which included a big chunk of stretching and warm-ups. But then we saw 3 periods of practice, which included some special teams. And so probably about 2 periods of drills. And I was watching Jeremiah Love because this is the first time we'd seen him since he missed the end of the USC game. He looked a little slowed to me with that right knee injury that he's recovering from. I mean, Marcus Freeman has said he's available to play, and Mike Denbrock was even stronger in terms of his expectations for Jeremiah Love when asked about him today. So he looked a little slow, but like I think it's important to note, like it was the beginning of practice. It wasn't like we were watching 11 on 11. He had to be giving it his all. So it's obvious and noticeable what he was wearing on his knee. I don't know if that'll be what he plays with on Friday or how long he's been using that. Maybe it's something he's still getting used to. But I think that's to me, it was at least notable to point out, hey, this is what Jeremiah Love looked like when we had a chance to look at him in a very small window today.
We had a little bit of a surprise today at practice in an offensive lineman we haven't seen practicing for a while. Tyler, why don't you tell them about it?
Yeah, Charles Jagusa, who was projected to be Notre Dame's starting left tackle, but went out in preseason camp with a bicep/shoulder injury. The wording was a bit confusing to me, but we were told that he would be out for the season. I'm not saying that he won't continue to be out for the season, but he is at least taking some reps in practice. We saw him doing some early drills in a guard role. I think it was mostly with like the number 2 guys that he was lining up next to. So no real sense of how close he is to playing. Mike Denbrock was pretty mum on that today. Right. We'll see if Marcus Freeman provides any more insight to that later this week. But it's good to see, regardless if he's available to play for the playoff or not, that his recovery is in a good place, that he would be anywhere close to playing, or at least putting on the pads and going through some stuff with his fellow offensive lineman.
And then the last thing that I wanted to hit on, unless there was something that you saw beyond it, was, just watching the quarterbacks warm up. We saw all 4 scholarship quarterbacks warming up. And then when they started to do drills, CJ Carr wasn't throwing during that time. So I know that there's a lot of speculation about what's going on with his elbow and that kind of thing. He doesn't show up in the availability report, and it's not limited to people in the 2 deeps. They don't say he's out or he's limited. So what's your read on what we're seeing from CJ Carr?
Yeah, well, they're making up the availability reports as they go. There's no one like holding them accountable, or like there's no.
Tyler, you are. And by the way, you got a compliment on your haircut. So.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'll compliment the barber as well, because I cut my hair myself. But you should see what the back looks like. But no, I'm kidding. I appreciate that, Brian, for saying that. I know Brian said that earlier. So yeah, it's concerning to some point. Like I don't know exactly what CJ Carr is doing, and as someone who you expect to be competing for the starting job next season, you would like for him to get more live reps in practice. But again, we just saw a small window. We don't know exactly what he is doing regularly, but it doesn't seem to be a great sign that he's not taking part in some of those reps in practice. But also, like, that doesn't necessarily mean he can't end up being the starting quarterback for Notre Dame next season either. So just a small status update on someone of obviously great importance for Notre Dame moving forward, with CJ Carr as a very promising young quarterback. What do you make of all the CJ Carr stuff this year?
I think it's a little bit overblown. I've been through this before with Jimmy Clausen, and Charlie really tamped that down and kind of hid the elbow injury with Jimmy Clausen. And really, when he started the 2007 season, after, we would never see him throw long in practice in the spring when he was an early enrollee. And then when he got to the fall, you could kind of tell there were some limitations with him in 2007 as a freshman. But I think I feel pretty confident that he will be ready to go and compete for the starting job in the spring. What's going on now? But again, I mean, elbow injuries are crazy, you know. I mean, you can have a setback. I mean, anything with your throwing arm, you can have a setback and so forth. But I am not anticipating that. I'm not anticipating that he would not be able to compete and probably win that job.
All right.
So do we want to hit questions or do we want to go into transfer portal news?
Let's get the transfer portal news out of the way because I imagine people will be interested in that. Not that they won't be interested in everything else, but let's get that out of the way before. And so then if people have questions related to that, they can get those in as well.
Well, this is a little confusing headline. Devontae Smith expected to transfer to Notre Dame from Alabama. And you're thinking, Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner, is out of eligibility. But there's another Devontae Smith who went to Alabama, a defensive back from Cincinnati. He would be a grad transfer. He's a cornerback. I looked, and he had about a 71 rating on Pro Football Focus, which is better than what Jordan Clark had coming out of Arizona State. It's not as good as what Jordan Clark has now. So, Tyler, you worked on the story. Why now? And what is Notre Dame getting in Devontae Smith?
Yeah, I think someone definitely competing for that nickelback role. He played the Husky position in Alabama's defense, which is essentially their nickelback. And
they imported that from Washington because that makes more sense of calling it the Husky position. You'd think it'd be the elephant or the tide position, but go ahead. High tide.
Yeah. So I don't. I believe I was looking at because I saw Husky and I was like, well, what's that mean? So I looked up a story and I apologize. I think it was one of the local newspapers down there had a story explaining the different positions, and Rover was among them too. So there's all kinds of mixed matching, different terminology that we have heard or haven't heard. But yeah, he's a nickelback. Continues in the mold of Notre Dame looking for experience in that nickelback role because as it seemed to have worked pretty well for Notre Dame the past 2 years with Thomas Harper and Jordan Clark. And yeah, I mean, my understanding and based on the silence I had when I was reaching out for confirmation for this is that Notre Dame is really trying to keep a lot of its portal activity under wraps and keep everyone's attention on the playoffs, especially for those on the roster. Although as it relates to this, I don't know that this is going to impact anyone significantly on the roster that's playing in the playoff. Like the two guys that are most likely to play nickelback, Jordan Clark, the starter, and then Rod Hurd, who was a third safety as well. Those guys are going to be gone next year. So that this guy would be someone that would be replacing them and adding more than just depth to the position. I mean, certainly we have seen guys like Rod Hurd, for instance, come in and not necessarily be starters as coveted transfer portal guys, but I would imagine the expectation for Devontae Smith and Notre Dame's coaching staff would be that he would be able to win the starting nickelback job for Notre Dame. And my guess in terms of why it was leaked or released today was an eager agent with the new transfer portal world. Folks want to brag about the work they're doing for their clients, and even if they're not putting their name on it, that would be my guess. I don't know how folks at On3 or other or ESPN reported this initially, but that would be my indication.
So what's going on with the portal now? And Tyler brings up a good point about suppressing the news and stuff, but there's stuff going on with the portal both ways right now. We're just not getting a lot of information about it. And Notre Dame, I mean, to their credit, the guys that are going to play Friday are all in. Now, once we get past Friday, it'll be interesting to see where this goes. But let's kind of review where we are with things. The portal opened on December 9th. It closes on December 28th. if you are a team that's in the playoff or if you have a bowl game after the 28th, you get an extra 5-day window to jump in the portal if you want to transfer at that point. So it's not critical that the guys that want to transfer out of Notre Dame do it right now. They may have some things going behind the scenes with third parties, and there are going to be people that transfer out. There are, and we're getting into this area where the scholarship limit's going to go up. We don't know exactly when that's happening. It's supposed to happen this offseason. But let's just play the numbers game. Notre Dame is at 96 right now, including all their incoming recruits and people that have announced that they're leaving for different reasons or out of eligibility. So if they're going to get down to 85, you figure there's going to be double digits. Even if they don't have to get down to 85, there's going to be double digits. So that's where we are with it. But I think, again, what we're seeing more this cycle, don't you think, Tyler, is more information coming directly from agents. And Tyler's not going to tell us because he wants to put his mute button on. He wants us to admire his haircut more.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that is a new development. I think that it's becoming more and more prevalent, and that is how so much of this works, which is fine. That's fine. I think, to be transparent from my point of view in terms of my reporting history as it relates to covering college football, I don't speak to any agents, so it's a new territory for me personally. I know we have other folks at Rivals who do that are helpful and in getting that, but at least especially when I'm covering high school recruits, there aren't. Although there are folks that probably will be using agents as high school recruits too. So I think Notre Dame has a good plan here. I asked Al Golden about this, like how, from his perspective, how is the recruiting staff, the personnel, that he wanted to call them a personnel department more than a recruiting staff, which it makes sense too. How have they done in terms of like allowing them to stay focused on what they're doing on the field while they're obviously active in the transfer portal? Otherwise, you wouldn't get a commitment from a former Alabama nickelback. So it is a difficult time to navigate this as a team in the playoff, but you're also an attractive destination. So I think there's some good and bad that comes with that, and Notre Dame's sorting it all out and trying to keep the focus on the playoff, at least for those that need to have their focus most on the playoff.
All right, well, we're going to focus on your.
Yeah, I wanted to add, in terms of transfer portal entries, guys who have their coach leave can also join for 30 days. And the latest one happened just today with Wake Forest head coach Dave Clawson. Stepping down. Yeah, it applies for head coaches only, not for assistant coaches. So I think we'll consider the transfer portal. There are limits to it, but it does seem sort of unending in the same way.
Okay, well, speaking of unending, we have an unending list of questions, comments, and compliments, and probably even a couple of digs on here. So why don't we get to the questions?
All right. There was one related to Devontae Smith outbound, said maybe bring him in to cross train at safety. Maybe I think you start him at nickelback, and then if you want another safety, I think Notre Dame will consider adding another safety. Notre Dame does have some young safeties it likes, but I would not be surprised if it continues to look for talented safety options as well. So I that's not to say that Devontae Smith won't do some safety if needed, but I think nickelback would be his first responsibility.
And Notre Dame's done really well with that the last two cycles.
Okay. TD4ND, can you explain the scholarship limit due next year if it gets approved?
Good luck with that. So what it would be is roster limit would go, they would set a roster limit. And this relates to the settlement with the lawsuits and the House bill and all this stuff. You're involving government, courts, and stuff. But basically what will eventually happen is the roster limit will be set, and it'll actually be smaller than what it is now when you include walk-ons in most places. However, then there won't be a scholarship limit per se. It'll be set by conferences, or in Notre Dame's case, by the school. So what we know walk-ons to be maybe won't exist or exist in the numbers that we see them right now, that because of the direct payments from the school, because of NIL money, everybody will be basically a scholarship player. So it could go as high as 105. That's the scholarship, or that's the roster limit they're talking about. So we should get clarity on that in the next few months, crossing our fingers, but we'll see. But that's what's expected to happen.
All right. Jeff Steven asks, despite the efforts by Freeman to avoid distractions and focus all on the IU game, do you think the McCullough job take has an impact, or the transfer announced today?
Tyler, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. You and I haven't talked about this, at least today, because it's been a busy day as is.
We have not.
But John Bryce, the Football Scoop, reported that Dylan McCullough, Notre Dame's running backs coach, is a part of the interview process at Ohio, where there is a head coach opening. Not terribly surprising, because Dylan McCullough has been pretty transparent that he wants to be a college football head coach at some point. And that in part fueled his return to college football from the NFL. So that is what Jeff is referring to there. He's among a few other finalists. I do not have any indication of whether he would be likely or less likely to be named the head coach over some of the other candidates. But I don't think that's terribly distracting. Like I think like he obviously coaches the running backs. I think the running backs would be supportive of him moving on. Obviously they want to play for him, but if he's to become a head coach, I don't think like that would hurt them. I don't know. Like, I would expect Dylan McCullough to be locked in here as much as he can. I mean, if he becomes the head coach, he probably would step away, but I don't know. I think I would argue if you're Ohio, it would mean more to have him have the additional college football playoff run on his resume than to have him here in the next couple weeks or whatever. So, I mean, there's no news there in terms of whether he'll be hired or not. So I don't think it's a distraction for him to interview. Yes, of course he's taking a bit time away, but it's not like he's missing practice to do that. And I don't think. I mean, you could also throw Marcus Freeman's contract extension in there. The transfer. I don't think. It's a part of college football, so I don't think it's that much of an impact in terms of the focus for the team. Like, they got to the playoff, they want to win the playoff. That is their number one priority right now.
Amen. I'm just going to agree with that and go on to the next question, because I think you try to minimize distractions. You can't eliminate all of them.
All right. How about this for a distraction? Ed Straub says, do you guys get paid more if the team you cover goes to the playoffs requiring extra work on your part?
No. and to be honest, we kind of are in charge of that, so we can only blame ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, the upside of Notre Dame continuing to win and play is that people remain interested at a high level, and then hopefully are interested in subscribing to our website. So our pay comes based off of advertising and subscribers, and so it's up to us.
YouTube viewers, and
YouTube viewers as well, yeah, and the YouTube viewers that have to watch the ads in order to help pay us. So we appreciate you even if you just watch and you're not a subscriber, but obviously. Our subscribers are what
you guys better watch it, or Tyler's going to put in a tip jar.
That's right. Start asking for some super chats in here.
I'll say this too. I mean, I've been doing this for over 4 decades, and this game Friday night is one of certainly in the top 5 or 6 that I've looked forward to covering in my career. So that's right. Payment in itself, and just being able to share the screen with Tyler and his new haircut.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it wasn't around the holidays. It makes it a little bit more complicated, but Otherwise, yeah,
That's why we had Christmas with the grandkids on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this. It's fun. All right. Bob Alvey says Indy finished this season with 10 wins and the pressure to make the playoffs. Now that they have made it, does the team feel a sense of relief that might result in a poor performance?
I don't sense a feeling of relief on their part. I mean, they've been in win or go home mode since September 8th. And I think they look at this as just an extension of that. Now there's other teams in the pool that are also win or go home with them. I don't think it's a relief at all. I think they want to play for a national championship. And this team has been aggressive. Marcus with his coaching, Marcus with his messaging in terms of being just kind of, hey, let's go for it. Let's not tiptoe into things. And I don't see that changing.
Yeah, I don't either. Like, there was a question that Al Golden was asked about the pressure that the team was under and if it was exhausting. And he said, yeah, it was exhausting. But it's a good kind of exhausting. That's the kind of pressure you need to put on yourself to perform at your best and to be able to win against whatever opponent is in front of you. And that's what these guys are here for. And like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that there would be relief when, like, yes, this was a goal, but this isn't the end goal. Like, you want to win games in the playoff. I don't think Notre Dame's happy to be here. I mean, they are happy to be here, but they're not content with being here. They want more than just.
And I think this team feels like they have a shot. I'm not sure that the 20. I mean, those guys would never say it, but I don't think we thought the 2018 or the 2020 teams had a shot. But I think there's people. I think Notre Dame is one of 5 or 6 teams that can legitimately say, yeah, we're realistically in this.
All right. Brian Habermill asked, with Charles Jagusa practicing some, would it be tempting to throw a 6 lineman formation out there with Anthony Knapp at tight end? Fun to think about, not a very practical use of my question.
No. It would not be tempting. Not when Mitchell Evans is your tight end. But Brian, I like the creativity in that question. You get an A for creativity. I'm not sending a note home to your mom.
I don't mind 6 lineman formations, so I would not be against that. I don't, as we talked about earlier, I'm not sure that Jagusa is in a spot that he would be capable or healthy enough to do that. But if it's someone else, if they want to get an extra lineman out there instead of a tight end, sure, they could do that. Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame has pretty good blocking tight ends, and I think those guys, especially Cooper Flanagan and Eli Raridan, have continued to get better at blocking as the season has progressed.
And you'd hurt Coogan's feelings if he wasn't the tight end, since he's the one guy that's caught a pass among the linemen this year.
Brian also asked, what were the other games you look forward to covering, Eric?
Well, certainly the 2012 championship game was huge. I think I maybe not going into it, the Oklahoma game in 2012. I think I felt more of it after the game of what significantly happened because, you know, Tyler was there with us for the Oklahoma game, but Al Lesser and I had seen that movie a whole bunch of times where Notre Dame goes to this visiting venue and they just get pushed off the stage, and that's kind of the end of the magic. And to see not only them beating Oklahoma in that stadium, an Oklahoma team that was ranked below them and favored on the betting line, and kicking their butt at the end of it, just kind of grinding them into the ground, was like, whoa, that was a whoa moment. But I would say those 2 would be right up there in terms of what I've looked forward to. A couple more, the Clemson game during the pandemic against number 1, and I was one of like 9 people in the press box because they had us spread out like seriously 35 feet apart. Yeah. So there were only 9 of us allowed to go. Only 1 per organization was allowed to go. And I would say one other would be the Duke game at the beginning of the 2020 season. You know, when I can't even talk about this. When sports got taken away from us and you kept hearing and reading all these stories that there was not going to be a football season, and you're like, am I going to get laid off? What's happening in this world? And all of a sudden I'm in the press box for that opener and they start to play the national anthem. I had tears running down my cheeks. And I don't even remember what the score of that game was, but I remember the feeling of being in a football stadium when everybody said there's not going to be football. That was so freaking awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, I think those games all would be on my list, at least of the ones that I've covered that overlapped with you. I wasn't at those two that you mentioned during COVID because we worked together, and so you were the one that were at those games.
But you were at some of the other games that year. You did get to go.
Yeah, right, correct.
I didn't hog it all.
No. I'm bad at remembering years. I think it's 2014 Florida State. Is it 2014?
Yeah.
Is that the right year? Like that was a big game, and lived up to it, obviously, with the way that finished, not in Notre Dame's favor, but that was a very fun game with the build up to it. The Ohio State games the last two seasons were really fun to cover as well. A lot of build up to those games, probably more so last year with it being a Notre Dame home game, because I've just been sort of like waiting for a really cool atmosphere in Notre Dame Stadium. And I think that was one of those. Like sometimes they don't happen. And I really do think that it's going to be a really special atmosphere in Notre Dame Stadium on Friday, as long as Notre Dame's offense isn't like playing terrible, because I think the crowd may turn on them fast. But I think it's going to be a really cool place to be. So I understand why the ticket prices are as high as they are.
The other thing about it being Indiana too, and you guys are probably bored to tears with me talking about this, it's a full circle moment for me. Indiana was the first team I covered out of college, and it's really fun to have this kind of full circle moment against a team that was in the shadow of their basketball program and still kind of is. To have a season like this is pretty cool.
Speaking of that, and your connections to covering IU basketball, Nundu 1121. Is it true that after Bobby Knight was fired, IU and ND stopped playing regularly in hoops because Indiana insisted on playing in football as well as basketball?
I don't remember that being a thing. They hadn't played since 91. And even that game was, I remember writing a story about it. I actually was trying to look in the South Bend Tribune archives, and our archives start at like 93. So I wasn't able to read the background, but they hadn't played for a long time up until that 91 game. So I don't remember that being true. I don't remember ever reporting that or confirming that or being asked that. So I don't think that's true. Do you remember anything, Tyler?
No. Well, I think, I mean, I haven't covered basketball very closely, so I don't know much about that. But I mean, I think if we're honest, I don't know if Notre Dame would say it, but like Notre Dame doesn't want to host IU basketball because it would be an IU basketball crowd. Like in men's basketball, that's the state of the way the program has been. And even before that, even when Notre Dame men's basketball is good, IU basketball, there are more IU men's basketball fans in the South Bend area than there are Notre Dame men's basketball fans. I just think
my first beat at the South Bend Tribune was Big Ten basketball and football, so I covered a lot of those games. We called it the reversible sweater, Notre Dame football and IU basketball. There were a lot of those kind of hybrid fans.
All right. Matthew Short says, what will the uniforms be like Friday? Any insider info?
Oh, I've got every detail on that, and boy, am I excited to tell you. Go ahead, Tyler.
I have no inside info. That's usually something they try to keep hidden, and that's something that Notre Dame likes to announce. I was honestly surprised that we saw Notre Dame players go out onto the field for the USC game in white pants before Notre Dame's football program.
Wouldn't that be funny to wear white pants and it's snow?
In the snow, you blend in, right? Yeah. Although I guess they probably
have them on defense.
Yeah, well, Indiana's probably going to want to wear all white. They're gonna make a request to do that. try to get rid of as much red on their uniforms as possible.
And Matthew, that's not a bad question. I'm making fun of myself because I never know anything about the uniforms, and nor do I follow it very closely. But it's a cool question. A lot of people care about it. I'm just not one of them.
Yeah. Eric is the least invested in uniforms, as you can imagine. Outbound mentioned the Bush Push game. Did you mention that game? Do you remember the build up to that? How
you know
excited
what?
were you for that?
I should say that. I should put that on the list. And I'll tell you why I forgot it. Because I think almost everybody that was in the press box that day said, you know what? This might be the best college football game I ever have been at. And then over time it faded because we all felt like Notre Dame was back on the college football map for good. And it really wasn't, because in 2007 they went 3-9, which was the worst. So that was 2 years later. But it was a really cool game. And I'll tell you when I was knocked over by a feather. So we used to go to the pep rally sometimes and cover them. And they decided they needed a bigger venue. So they did it in the stadium. And I parked and I'm walking toward the stadium and I see heads sticking up from the top row of the stadium. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? There's that many people in the stadium. There were 45,000 people for the pep rally. They pushed them all to one side, but they were up in the upper deck. It was nuts. And I'll tell you, the atmosphere during that game, and when Notre Dame thought they won, and then they put time back on the clock and let them run the Bush Push play. Wow, it was pretty cool. So yeah, that I forgot about that. That was yep.
Yeah, that was before my time covering Notre Dame. I was a high school student when that game happened. So
I mean, I was at the Notre Dame Florida State game too in '93. I wasn't as hyped up about that because that wasn't my beat at the time. I was the Florida State sidebar guy, so but it was a cool game.
Yeah. Matthew Barthel asked, and sorry, Matthew, your question was submitted quite a bit ago. Chris Mitchell was the intended target on the NIU interception, the USC interception, and at least one not close incompletion end zone fade against Texas A&M. Does Leonard have chemistry / communication problems with him?
I'm not sure that it's just limited to Chris. And I don't think Riley would ever hold it against him. I mean, it was a learning process all year with Riley Leonard getting chemistry with all these guys. You think about how big the rotation was, that Riley Leonard was kind of coming into this late. He's trying to play football in a new way. And guys like Mitchell Evans weren't even healthy at the beginning of the year, fully healthy for him to develop chemistry with. So I think it's kind of come along. So I don't know that it's I think if you asked Riley, he'd say I have full faith in Chris Mitchell, and he would not be just saying it to the media. That would be, I think, truly how Riley feels. I think it's a good question, but I think it's more than just Chris Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems more than a coincidence that it has been him, but I think it is like the deep throwing is something that Riley Leonard has struggled with. I thought the USC one was more of a miscommunication. I just thought the Northern Illinois one was just a bad throw. And I maybe Riley Leonard thought he was going to undercut it and thought, or didn't see a defensive back there or something. I'm not sure what happened there, but that was just so underthrown. It just seemed, and maybe it was a physical limitation too.
It could have, because remember, he was hobbling around after getting that O'Malley kid.
Right. He did. I mean, he had some pretty strong throws at different times around that. So I don't know. Maybe something just happened, or he didn't set his feet right, or what, who knows? I'm not an expert enough to know exactly that, but I do think Leonard and Mitchell's connection hasn't been certainly as explosive as we thought it could be this season, and that might not be all on one or the other guy. It could be a combination of the two together. So something that I think if it does open up, I have my doubts with it changing this late in the season, but Chris Mitchell, if he can execute on some deep balls with Riley Leonard, would certainly help the offense. Scott Fegan asks, who is/are the players that scare you the most on IU?
O'Rourke, the quarterback, is really good. I mean, he leads the country in pass efficiency.
It's just Rourke. He's not Irish.
Rourke, yeah. I'm sorry, Rourke. Yeah. Curtis Rourke.
Maybe he is Irish. I don't know. I just thought it was funny.
I'm making everybody into Irish. If he throws an interception, we'll make it O'Rourke because he's throwing it to the Irish guys. Curtis Rourke. McHale, I'm trying to remember his last name. Kamara impresses me. I mean, they didn't have a lot of all Big Ten guys. D'Angelo, is it Ponce, the cornerback?
Pons, yeah.
D'Angelo Pons. Those are the three guys that caught my attention when I was studying them. I mean, they play very well together. They have a lot of transfers. I mean, their stats are good. I mean, you look at their receivers, they got lots of different shapes and sizes. They got two guys that are good deep threats. Their running backs are decent. And their kicker is 9 out of 10 on field goals this year. But his longest field goal is 41 yards.
Yeah, Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper are the two receivers that I think scare you the most of the receiver group. So I wanted to highlight them. You mentioned most of the other guys that I would have mentioned. And it'll be interesting to see what sort of role the weather plays in inhibiting Indiana's ability to take advantage of its passing game. All right. Keith Nagy says he offers a 25 offensive line depth chart for us, and I will try to okay, got it. So he has Charles Jagasa at left tackle, Billy Strouth at left guard. Is that Ashton Craig Anthony Knapp at center? EW, who would that be at right guard? And then Gerby Lambert at right tackle. Your thoughts? I need to pull up a roster. Who's EW?
I think Billy Strouth is definitely a starter. I think Aamil Wagner is definitely a starter. I would not.
Oh, I bet that's Aamil Wagner. EW is probably AW, would be my guess.
Yeah. Okay. I would say Strouth and Wagner, and I would start there. I think you've invested a lot in Anthony Knapp. Where does he end up? I mean, it's a first world problem. I think either Ashton Craig or Pat Coogan would be the starting center. I'm not sure about Gerby Lambert being a starter. Boy, he's super, super impressive. I mean, he's the guy getting off the bus. So you go, that's the guy I want on my team. But Jagaza, I think if he's fully healthy, he's going to be a starter somewhere. And maybe Anthony Knapp is at the guard spot that you have Aamil Wagner at. Maybe that would be my lineup. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think of the most likely to move to guard, it probably is Jagasa. I mean, just
over Knapp. You think Jagasa would move before Knapp would?
I think so. I know Jagasa has the better size, but I think Knapp is a better mover.
Think he's a better athlete?
Yeah, better athlete.
Okay.
I at least moving backwards in your pass pro, especially, like I think that, and that's obviously one of the most important things as a left tackle. So that's my personal opinion. And so I don't see
a good question, Keith.
Aamil Wagner moving inside. I think he's better on the outside too. So, and we'll see if Gerby Lambert can compete to push for a tackle spot. But these are way better problems for Joe Rudolph going into this season than he had going into last season.
Yeah, I mean, there's always somebody that surprises you that kind of comes up from that you're not expecting to compete for a spot. And I don't know if Rocco will come back. Rocco's played really good football. Who am I thinking of, the sophomore that's bounced back before guard and tackle, the big kid from Carolina.
Oh, Sullivan Absher.
Sullivan Absher has been at least competing for things to this point. I mean, he could be a guy that could rise up with a really good summer in the weight room and surprise you. I'm not predicting that he'd be a starter, but I think he'll be in the talk in terms of competing.
Yeah, and Sam Pendleton.
And Sam Pendleton.
A number of games this year, so it'll be interesting and a more fun offensive line competition than it was last offseason. All right, Scott Fegan says, do you see any O-line recruits moving to D-line since we are solid with depth on the O-line, especially if we can't get the portal options?
I don't think we see that a whole lot anymore. No. And I've seen it a few times during my time covering Notre Dame, and most of the time it doesn't work. I remember Chris Stewart going over there and it not working out real well. I do not see them flipping over. You're more, I mean, in this day and age, you're better off going to get somebody from the transfer portal that's played and that you've seen them on tape and you know that can perform than trying to do an experiment by flipping somebody to the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see defensive linemen in Owen Strebig, in Will Black, and Matty Augustine. I guess Cameron Herron maybe, but he's undersized for either position, offensive line or defensive line. And
they like him as a future center.
Yeah, the goal is him to play center. So maybe if that doesn't work out, or if someone emerges as center, as a long-term center, and he's blocked up there, maybe that happens. But yeah, it doesn't have the one guy I could think of, and he was never an offensive line at Notre Dame. He switched and wanted to be a defensive lineman, was Jerry Tillery. And that was obviously successful for him and for Notre Dame.
But he was an elite defensive lineman in high school too. It wasn't like that was
right, but he was initially recruited as
right. He was, lineman. And Harry will remind you that. And I remember saying on the radio one time on WSBT Sports Beat, I said, I wonder if Harry thinks that whether Jerry would have been an All-American on offense, and I got a text from him saying yes, he would have. So I had confirmation on that.
Yeah, and shout out
going back to the Ashton Craig thing, though, the one thing that's kind of up in the air is Ashton suffered his ACL tear in September, and if it's a complete 1 year recovery for him, he may not be ready at the beginning of the season. So
right,
I think that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I wanted to shout out IXLR82 for mentioning that Tillery was the last to flip sides to remember that too. So,
but he did before he got there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll mention this. Like, I like James Flanagan as a tight end, but if he wanted to play defensive end, I'd let him play defensive end. Like he's, I like him a lot on both sides of the ball. I'm not predicting that to happen, but, who was a monster defensive end in high school was Michael Mayer. Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. That makes sense too. Yeah. All right, Eric, I think that's all the questions I've seen. I'll scroll through some here that we may have missed. But let's
okay. So
things.
We had a very awkward announcement last night of Marcus Freeman's contract extension, a 6-year deal. So it's the 2 remaining years on the first contract, and then 4 additional ones. So that'll take him through the 2030 season. Tyler's scrolling through the questions. Why now? I think at the end of the 3rd year, that 3rd year has been so reliable in terms of predicting what a Notre Dame coach is going to do in the future. I think it makes sense. The fact that Marcus's agent has been at least not trying to quell the talk about NFL interest. And I think the OSU job hanging out there, Ohio State job, it's not open. But if it opened at some time, Ryan Day left for whatever reason, I'm sure Marcus Freeman would be somebody that Ohio State would have a lot of interest in. I think it's a good move for Notre Dame. Why during the playoff? I mean, I think you could do it any time during December and January. I don't have a problem with it being right now. I think it's a positive move. I don't think it's a distraction. So
yeah, I agree. I agree with all those things. TD4ND asked, did they adjust the buyout?
I would imagine that they do. I don't think Marcus probably had a real big one in the original contract, and now I think if they're
Usually
going to
the more you get paid, the higher your buyout becomes.
right, but I think the prospect of, okay, let's make it difficult, and Marcus probably was on board with it, make it difficult for him to go to Ohio State if that job opens, which again, it could. If you took a poll among people that live in Columbus, they would like the job to be open. But you know what? If he starts winning playoff games, they'll change their minds.
And Matthew Short says this definitely doesn't feel like Weiss and that extension. Would you agree with that?
Very much so. That was in Charlie's first year. That was in 2005. That was around the Bush push game.
And much longer, too.
And much longer. And it didn't have an offset in it. And Charlie was even on our podcast and mentioned that they didn't do an offset. So what is an offset? It means if you have a buyout and then you get a new job, you subtract the new salary from the buyout. So you're not paying all the money in the buyout. Well, Charlie didn't have an offset. So he not only got all the offset money, he got his new salary at first with the Kansas City Chiefs. He was at Florida for a little bit, and then he was at Kansas. So he got all that money. And that's why I said, Charlie, you need to buy me a drink. And he said, I'm unemployed right now.
TD4ND says, do you think Leonard has developed more chemistry in the last 2 weeks?
I don't know about more, but I think he certainly had a chance to work on things without a game being on top of him. I had a chance to sit in on his interview session Sunday. And I mean, I think he's pretty confident and he's feeling pretty good about the players, that he's throwing the ball to and so forth. Again, I don't think they're introducing a lot of new elements to him. I think they're just trying to get him better at what he's already ascending with. So I don't know that it's necessarily better chemistry, but I think maybe more efficient, maybe better in his decisions.
Yeah, I just wouldn't buy that whatever would happen in the last 2 weeks would be more important than what had happened throughout the season. I think that would play a much bigger role than what they've done in some limited practice opportunities. All right, Eric, I think I've exhausted the questions. Outbound asks, is there a Football Never Sleeps tailgate Friday? No, we do not do that. Eric does the pregame radio show, so it would be hard to do both of those things at once. And I'm not capable of hosting a tailgate on my own. So I do try to stop by and see folks. So if you are a subscriber and you want to reach out to me, you can do that. And I can see if I can stop by on my way to the stadium.
And if you see me walking and shivering, you can say hello as I'm walking to the stadium. Okay. Go ahead. Tyler, you were going to say something?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So we had coordinator interviews today. You were sitting in with Al Golden. I was with Mike Denbrock. So what was your biggest takeaway from sitting with Al Golden?
Yeah, I mean, and this isn't surprising. He took blame for the USC game. Defensively, he felt that he could have done a better job play calling and putting guys in the right positions, sort of disguise some coverages or change things up a little bit more than he did. He was proud of the way those guys fought and dug in and came up with plays at the end of the game. Spoke about Howard Cross and how much he plans to use him. He said he's not planning on working him in, meaning he's not on a snap count. So
meaning he don't want him standing next to him. That's what he said.
Yeah,
he's not going to be standing next to me.
Yeah, he does me no good standing next to me. So he's gonna. That means that we're not going to see, at least if Al Golden's telling the truth, we're not going to see Cross playing like 10 snaps unless there were some sort of setback. The plan is for him to resume his role as a full-time player. And obviously Notre Dame will continue to rotate on the defensive line, but he'll be back in that number one nose tackle role.
From Mike Denbrock, I thought the most interesting thing was his process in terms of play calling, both in the weather and what he does with the extra time. The weather, unless it's really, really cold, which it won't be, it'll be in the 20s or low 30s. unless there's wind or a hurricane, which we won't have a hurricane, he doesn't have to adjust the plan too much, but he usually has a backup plan in case the winds are a little bit greater than what they thought. In terms of having the extra time, he said he has this board in his office where it's basically his call sheet. And he said it was just overfilled with way too many ideas. And he had to really pare that down. And that's the danger of having too much time. You put too much in. And you want to put some new wrinkles in, but you really want to hone in on what you do best. So I think you'll see Notre Dame trying to do what they've done best down the stretch, and that's running the football, being a competent passing team, not a prolific one, but a competent one, but really leaning into their rush offense, the best rush offense Indiana will have seen against statistically the number one rush defense in the country. And speaking of which, as we kind of go into the X's and O's here, Tyler, briefly, what do you feel like is the key to a Notre Dame victory? And then we'll flip it for IU.
Yeah, so I think in terms of a victory for Notre Dame, offensively, run the football, make enough plays in the passing game to give the running game a better chance. Like, don't allow Indiana to stuff the box and make it impossible to run the ball because you can't throw the ball at all. Protect the football, and don't put the game on Jeter's leg. To me, that is an important thing. I don't trust Mitch Jeter right now, so I think the offense needs to do its job in terms of converting red zone opportunities into touchdowns, and then defensively pressure Rourke or O'Rourke if you're Eric. Tackle after catches. I think that's important to limit Indiana's yak, and then create some tackle for losses. That is something that Indiana does a good job of, is avoiding those tackles for loss, and getting behind the chains. But if Notre Dame's defense can do that, I think that makes things a lot harder for Indiana's offense.
For me, for Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman talks about an offensive line, defensive line driven program. This is where it needs to show up.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the turnovers. These teams are both really good in turnover margin. Notre Dame is second, Indiana's fourth. But you're right about the pressuring Rourke or O'Rourke, depending on whether he's Irish that night, because Notre Dame didn't do a great job of that against Jaden Maiava for USC. And he handled what pressure he got pretty well. I mean, he was throwing passes down the field and completing them with pressure in his face. It'll be interesting to see how Rourke does. He did not do well with it against Ohio State.
Right.
He did okay with it against Michigan, but really not that good. Those were the two teams that were really able to get after him, and it did affect him. So that'll be interesting. And Notre Dame didn't have a great pass rush. Now with Howard Cross back, I think not only does it make the middle of that defensive line even better, it opens up things for the guys on the edges. So that'll be interesting for me to see. What does IU need to do? They need to handle the big stage. They're not used to these kind of games. They had one this year at Ohio State and didn't handle it well. And the Michigan game was probably tighter than what they thought it should be. But they did win it at least. Ohio State didn't win their Michigan game.
Yeah, I mean, that turnover margin, if IU wins that is something that makes them more of a live underdog there. A big plays that Rourke can hit in the passing game. And I think, like, if IU can find a balance with its running game, I think that goes a long way in terms of if it's able to find some more success offensively. And I think defensively, try to force Leonard into mistakes. He doesn't make a lot of them, but when he has, they've often been costly for Notre Dame. And I think the hardest part about that is that IU has to try to shut down Notre Dame's running game. So there should be opportunities for Leonard to make plays. And hopefully the Irish receivers on the other end can make those plays and help him out. And from IU's perspective, maybe they win some of those one-on-one battles.
We have some rapid fire topics we can get to. Do we need to hit the question queue before we do that?
I'll do this one real quick. Is the Alabama transfer going to be able to play in this IU game? Joe Long says, and that's no. The transfer is for the 2025 season. You don't get a transfer mid-season.
Right. Someday maybe they'll try to work that in. All-American news. Xavier Watts picked up his third first-team All-America honor on Monday from the AP. There's 5 that determine consensus and unanimous All-Americans. There's 2 more to go. So that's still in play for him. Unanimous. He is a consensus at least. When was the last time Notre Dame had a 2-time unanimous All-American? It was Ross Browner way before Tyler was born in 1976 and 77. Let's talk a little bit about recruiting, Tyler. The Rivals 250 for 2026. Is that updated tomorrow, Tuesday?
Yeah, that'll come out Tuesday. I believe Notre Dame has 3 of its commits in the old 250. I would imagine those 3 guys will still stay there. Those are Chaston Smith, the cornerback, Thomas Davis Jr., linebacker, and then quarterback Noah Grubbs. I would anticipate all 3 of those guys remaining there. We'll see whether or not they move up or down based on how some of their junior seasons.
Mason's little brother has a chance to jump in there?
I don't think so. Rivals has him as a 3-star, so that would be a pretty big jump. So I would be a little surprised if he made that far of a jump.
Stats were good.
Yeah, I think he plays pretty bad competition, and I'm not sure. I don't know what sort of eval any of our Rivals guys had on him this year. So, but yeah, I mean, he certainly played pretty well as a junior. So I think he's due for a rating/rankings increase, but I would be a bit surprised if he gets inside the 250 on Tuesday.
What else recruiting news wise do we need to
not a lot? Ben Nichols, who I think I mentioned last week, he's announcing his commitment decision on Christmas Eve. An offensive lineman.
I handled one of those ones.
An offensive lineman out of Michigan, and I think Notre Dame has a good chance with him. I have a Rivals future cast in for him, so we'll see if the Irish end up winning out and getting some good Christmas news.
Well, we've got lots of content coming up this week. We have a podcast this week. We have all kinds of written content. We have no telepathic content, but we have Bob Morton and I are going to host a post-game show. It probably won't be right after the game. We'll go to the press conference and then we'll find a place to get it done. And then Tyler and I will have one that you won't be able to stay up for. It won't be live anyways. But you can wake up and have your coffee and watch that. You can watch Bob Morton and me live with your beer or your bourbon or your hot chocolate, or whatever it is that you have, with Curtis O'Rourke, since he'll be having Irish coffee as well.
Yeah, we'll have a Place Your Bets video previewing the game with some prop bets as well. We'll post that on Thursday. My days of the week are all mixed up with the game being on a Friday. But we'll have that as well. Like I mentioned at the start of the show, gift subscriptions are available. NotreDame.rivals.com/gifts/purchase, or just find the link that's listed below us in the video description. You can gift a Notre Dame fan in your life a subscription for just 1 month or up to 5 years if you want to for InsideNDSports.com. Pretty hassle-free. So if you're still looking for Christmas
almost the length of Marcus Freeman's contract.
yeah. And yeah, you can extend it whenever you want as well. So as always, NDYT is the promo code for a 30-day free trial if you've not tried out InsideNDSports.com as well. And subscribe to the channel here, like the show, send us more comments, tell us what you think of Eric's haircut, since I got all the compliments on haircuts. But yeah, we appreciate everyone being here and have a good week.
I don't cut my own hair.
Enjoy what's coming Notre Dame's way on Friday.